Effectively securing your organization and its reputation requires a smarter approach. To maximize efficiency and minimize risk, security experts turn to LogRhythm, the only leading solution built solely for security teams by a security team committed to your success. With next-gen SIEM, user and entity behavior analytics, network traffic and behavior analysis, security automation and orchestration, and compliance, LogRhythm provides security made smarter. The greatest threat to businesses today isn't the outsider trying to get in. It's the people you trust, the ones who already have the keys, your employees, your contractors, and privileged users. 60% of online attacks are carried out by insiders. To stop these insider threats, you need to see what users are doing before an incident occurs. Observe It combats insider threats by detecting risk activity, investigating in minutes, effectively responding, and stopping data lost. Give it a test drive at observeit.com/securityweekly. Today's determined attackers easily bypass even the most advanced network defenses. Trying to ramp up staff to detect their backdoors can cost thousands of dollars and take months, even years. With Active Countermeasures AI Hunter, we enable junior analysts to detect even the most advanced backdoors in a matter of hours. Sign up for a demo and purchase our product today by visiting activecountermeasures.com/ESW. Active Countermeasures. Make every analyst a hunter. Welcome back, everyone, to Enterprise Security Weekly. A couple of quick announcements. Make sure that you register for InfoSec World. That's happening April 1st through the 3rd at Disney's Contemporary Resort. We will be there as Security Weekly. The discount code is OS19-SEC-WEEK. 15% off the main conference or a world pass. We are in the Pandora Podcast Beta. You can go to pandorapodcastbeta.splashthat.com and get early access. The full release will be sometime in December. Alrighty. Also, I am appearing on a webcast with StealthBits. You can register for StealthBits webcast titled Emerging and Continuing Trends in 2019, Privacy Regulations, Active Directory Security, and Machine Learning. Myself and Gabriel Gums. Gabriel is awesome, by the way. It's going to be so much fun. You can register for that webcast at stealthbits.com/assessment. So, John, we've got some news to talk about, of course. Starting with Riverbed, which is announcing enhancements to SD-WAN. And essentially, I've looked into the SD-WAN thing. It takes me back into the days when I worked in a networking team in like early 2000s, and we had to connect multiple remote offices, and we were using Frame Relay. It was Frame Relay. And we're like, there's got to be a better way to connect remote offices. We should use this newfangled thing they're calling the internet. And how do we make sure that we're secure in sending our traffic over the internet? Well, we need to use VPN. All SD-WAN is like I think a fancy VPN. It's the evolution of that whole discussion that we were having, 15 or 20 years ago. So.
Well, and this is interesting for me. It's actually directly applicable. We run into this problem a lot. I'm just going to use the SANS Institute as an example. So whenever we travel, it's like a circus, right? We go to different cities, we set up networks, we want to have consistency across those configurations on those networks. We want to have visibility, we have monitoring, and we want to have flexibility. We want quality of service, and we want the network to be able to set up in 5 to 10 minutes and tear down instantaneously. Yeah. And that type of case study is a very extreme case study, but I think it lines up with this idea of the SD-WAN.
Yep.
And we were using Ruckus, and Ruckus has some problems directed DHCP. And we can actually go to a centralized cloud management console and make those configurations on the fly. And that's huge, right? So I do think of this as something, when we're talking about multiple remote offices, you're trying to tie together with a centralized kind of unified policy for how these different WANs are going to be established and secured. This is huge, right? So I'm a little bit, I guess, confused about how this is new, because I've thought Riverbed has had this for a while.
It's just an enhancement to their product, I think, John.
Yeah. So looking at it, I'd like to know what's new. It looks to me like they're moving into that subscription-based pricing. That looks like it's the single biggest thing. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I think that that's actually a fantastic thing. But that's how it seems to be the biggest news as far as this is released anyway.
Yeah, I say major enhancements to the core routing stack enables support for larger and complex enterprise networks. I can see there are some major engineering going behind supporting the routing infrastructure for large organizations, especially.
Yep.
Cool. Tufin is planning to go IPO. It's an Israeli-based cybersecurity firm. Of course, like many vendors in the space, they're known for their firewall policy management. And as we do briefings with many of these companies, I believe they're all pivoting in some capacity. And I think they're building upon, hey, we can help you manage your firewall policies. And then they added, hey, we can help you orchestrate and learn about how changes impact that environment and then automatically make changes. And hey, if we can do that, we can automate a lot of your other security policies as well. And basically, it's a play into security orchestration and automation, building upon their foundation. And in this case, their likely exit, as is described in the news article, is IPO, which is great. It's awesome.
Well, and out of all the exits, I think that this is, for me, for a company, this is one of the happier exits, right? Getting bought kind of screams to me like you're trying to abandon the company. But this shows at least some type of steadfast commitment to making sure the company continues to exist and not just get bought out by a larger company.
I hear you. I think about a lot of exits by acquisition, I think are logically make sense and are a good thing for everyone, right? Not in all cases, certainly. But I agree. There's something to be said for going, I created this company and we're taking it all the way to IPO and it's going to continue as a company without getting bought. I agree. That's really cool. It's much more rare, obviously, than acquisition.
Absolutely. And it's a good thing for them. So congratulations to them and their team.
Awesome. Flexera is making it easy for you to decrease the need for repackaging. I thought this was actually pretty cool. As you deploy applications using Flexera's tools, you don't want to have to repack your entire application and redistribute it out. You can make updates a lot easier to your own applications. I thought that was pretty cool.
And I still wonder, dude, is this the future? I've been talking a lot more lately about how we're seeing the eventual decline of Active Directory, on-prem Active Directory in particular. And the idea, when you look at Workspace ONE, the ability to deliver applications, maintain access to those applications, are we looking at the beginning of the end of the desktop? We're looking at the beginning of the end of all of these applications running on discrete individual components that are spread all over the place, and instead pulling it into a centralized virtualization. I personally think that's where things are heading, and I'd love to get your take on it as well.
Well, I think that's a glimmer of hope for the future. When you think of what we used to call appliances, or I think of healthcare, there's that old Windows box that's running that old application that's used to interface with some medical device. Does that start to go away? And I think that really helps us from, especially a security perspective, but also an IT perspective. I don't have to maintain this legacy hardware and software. It's not agile in the sense of agile development, but it's more agile in a sense that it's not tied to an operating system and hardware where the application doesn't need to be, right? Like the hardware, it's managing, like in an not IoT, but industrial controls case, right? But the software, I want to see the day where we don't have to run an old Windows machine or some other device that can't be updated, right? That device is just, the application might be running on it, but it's independent of an operating system. And I think we're seeing that shift away from reliance on the operating system, especially with containers and serverless.
And I think that it's a great point for a lot of people getting into computer security. I was talking about this at Hackfest with Ed Scotus's con last week. This is a huge opportunity for security professionals because there are very few organizations or people that understand how this type of integration is going to be moving forward into a quote-unquote cloud-centric platform moving forward. So it's great green fields if you're just getting started, but it's also terrifying because I think if we don't understand these apps and what the implications actually are, we're going to have massive security vulnerabilities, not necessarily because the platform itself is insecure, but because people didn't implement it in a secure fashion.
Yeah, we were talking about this yesterday. Was it day before yesterday on Application Security Weekly with John Kinsella from now Qualys, right? It was Layered Insight was acquired by Qualys. And we were talking about it in a Windows perspective, right? If you could containerize your Windows apps, which, Microsoft with Azure and Docker is working to support, and he gave some insights on that. And what we agreed on was that, that helps it remove itself from the operating system so you don't have a Windows 2003 server or something sitting on your network, but the application's still insecure, right? The code could still be insecure. Also, the new infrastructure, containers and or serverless, is still insecure. And we talked about the problem that's cropping up now that we ran into personally here at Security Weekly is when you're deploying this stuff, if it's not configured correctly, you're going to get hacked. Like if you leave your Docker API open to the internet, someone's going to drop a container on it if it's not configured properly, and they're going to do crypto mining or DDoS, right? I mean, that happened to us, and now I'm seeing news story after news story that happens. And like you said, John, it's understanding the new architecture. Similar problems to what we had before. It's just in a new place.
Well, I think that the last point is key. I was with Marcus Random 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago, when I was in Boston and I missed the show. And Marcus talked about the firewall and how he created this awesome toolkit to allow people to create firewalls. And what people immediately took that to mean was they didn't have to secure their apps because they put this magical device in front of it.
Yeah.
And he never meant for that. And virtualization, whenever VMware first came out, people are like, well, we don't have to do as much with securing systems because we can do snapshots, we can revert snapshots. And I have this fear with Docker and Kubernetes and virtualization and Azure Active Directory that, and I heard it, I was on the airplane. I was flying into, well, we got rerouted to Boise, and there were two people talking in front of me. And this one guy is like, it's awesome. With Azure, you don't have to worry about security. It just automatically sets up Active Directory, and there's no security considerations whatsoever. And that's garbage. And Bo and Mike Felch at Wild West Hackenfest had a really great talk about really massive security issues that exist with Amazon's Azure command line interface and the API being exposed to the open internet. And what it boils down to is that last sentence that you had. You need to understand the technologies that you're implementing, regardless of what those technologies are.
Yep, absolutely. Let's see. F-Secure's got an interesting thing they came out with. You can escalate directly to F-Secure. So like if you're in their endpoint detection system, I think it's a story that I had in there twice by accident. So basically it's on-demand elevate to experts. So if you're seeing something, if you have F-Secure and something's wrong on your endpoint and you have an alert and you don't understand it, you can escalate it to F-Secure. I think it's a neat feature. My concern when I've seen stuff like this is, well, one, you have data concerns. What data is being sent when I escalate or elevate it, right? And then the second thing is, like, how long am I going to have to wait? Like, if I'm having an incident and this feature rolls out and it gets popular, what's the SLA on when I actually hear back on a report, right? And then how useful is that data?
I think this is fantastic because, look, I think we have 3 or 4 stories today that are all about EDR. And I have huge problems with automated response, having worked in this industry, especially in incident response and stuff for years. But this is one of the first things that I've seen as far as EDR that's like, yeah, that's a damn good play. Because what this is effectively doing is it's taking that EDR idea and it's allowing you to get expert forensics and EDR support right away and not having to call up Mandiant and have them come in for $500 an hour, I think is going to be a huge win point. And I think that this is a great differentiator. It makes sense. It's clear. And I think that they're going to sell the living hell out of this. And I think you're going to see a lot of other companies following suit. In fact, Chris Brenton and I were talking about this for active countermeasures. We have a lot of customers that send us emails. They're like, hey, AI Hunter found this. What are your thoughts on that? And if we could turn that into a service that could be marketable, I think you're right. The SLAs are a huge part of it, but I think that that's a very marketable service to get that kind of expert on the fly in a box.
Absolutely. I had an article here about DigiCert, one of our sponsors for Paul Security Weekly. They've been selected to be the organization behind the PKI that will support USB Type-C authentication. Now, we already have U2F keys that I have one from YubiKey, actually, that is a USB-C, which is nice because if your computer and your phone, like my computers and my phone, all have USB-C, well, most of them do anyway, and so I can use that same key on my phone and on my computer. It's really small, which is really nice. And so now I don't understand what the newer standard is. It's going to require PKI. It must be some kind of smart card-ish technology that'll do that. But I not being an Apple user much anymore. I've got one Apple computer, hopefully getting rid of that in the coming months. I like the Type-C connector, right?
Well, and this becomes even more important. We released Mike Felch and Bo Bullock released Cred King,
Mm-hmm.
and Cred King allows you to bypass U2FA for Google. And how it
Yeah.
does that is whenever you set up the proxy server for the fish and you're authenticating into Google, if somebody has U2FA, the proxy server identifies itself as an iPad or an iDevice. And Google realizes, well, you can't use U2FA with mobile device. So it completely sidesteps that entire authentication mechanism. What
Interesting.
this does, and why I think that this is so important, is now we can identify and say, look, these devices can support that U2FA with USB Type C. So it basically is going to close a loophole that we've been taking advantage of for about a year now. So this can't happen fast enough.
What else do we have in here? Well, and this makes sense too. Siemens Aruba and HPE have formed a partnership. And if you think about HPE, what is it? ClearPass? They got ClearPass and Aruba, right? So they're able to do the authentication. They're able to do the network monitoring, and taking that into an industrial control systems environment, I think is just, a recipe for success. Their products are very well suited for that. So this was no surprise to me.
Well, there's another one, I can't remember which one it was, that was talking about being able to monitor the network and identify IoT devices. I can't.
Oh, it might be
find it.
Awake Security's platform is really cool
Maybe
in that
maybe it was
respect.
Awake.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
answers to me. Awake, and we've done interviews with them as well, and I like the company a lot. And they spent a lot of time with SOCs. Like their story is, they spent a lot of time with SOC. They basically shadowed SOC analysts and were trying to understand what the most common problems were. And it resonated with me when I was an analyst, right? Doing this every day, was I'd find an alert and I go, what is that? Right? Like it's something weird, but like, I don't know what it is. And Awake will monitor the network and help give you that context of like, what is it? Right. And for that reason, that's, why I like Awake.
And I think that we're finally starting to see a batch of vendors, kind of with the show today, that are talking about the IoT problem in a way that's not completely insane.
Yeah.
We
Talked
have
about
a
that
ton of vendors
yesterday.
like, we solved the IoT dilemma with artificial intelligence. Like, what the living hell does that mean?
Yeah.
And whenever they're talking about monitoring the devices, being able to selectively identify these devices passively, and then develop security policies to kind of wrap security around access to those devices, all of a sudden you're starting to talk my language and you're making sense in such a way that it doesn't seem like just spin cycle and hype.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I don't know if there's anything else in here that we really need to talk about.
I did want to talk a little bit about more EDR. Sophos
Yeah.
has incorporated EDR into Intercept X.
Mm-hmm.
And I just have a warning for anybody that's looking at the EDR game, if you don't mind, Paul.
Yeah, go ahead.
So a lot of our shows, I would say almost every single show that I've been on for the past 6-7 months, there's been another vendor that's been talking about this automated EDR, right? And how automated EDR is the absolute best way to go. And whenever you talk to executives, I did a number of IANS conferences while I've been on the road as well. And I asked at the last CISO summit, we had about 60, no, it wasn't that many. I think it was only like 40 CISOs in the room. And I asked them, how many of you in this room does the idea of automated EDR, like automatically having a platform that automatically detects and responds to cyber alerts in your environment, how many of you is that an appealing case study? And every single hand went up. And then we talked about it for a little bit. And a lot of the CISOs and the CIOs and the CTOs that were in the room talked about how this is where we have to be. This has to be automated. This has got to be a great return on investment. This is amazing. And then I asked a follow-on question. I said, so if your EDR platform, if it automatically brings down a mission critical app, or it shuts down a mission critical activity on a workstation by mistake, how many of you in this room are going to be blamed for that? And every single hand went up.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, based on that, how many of you, if that happened, would politically have to either drastically scale back the automation or shut the automation off completely? And almost every single hand went up in that room. So if you're listening to this show and you're somebody that's at that level and you're looking at these automated technologies, the promise of automation for EDR is fantastic. And I think it's going to get there eventually for the 85-90% of the malware that's running around. But you have to ask yourself, if that platform brings down a critical application by mistake, How is your organization going to handle that politically? And I'm not saying don't implement these technologies, but I'm saying have an open and honest conversation with the rest of the C-Os in the organization and the rest of the management of the different IT verticals in your organization, and work through this case study scenario and truly get understanding and buy-in about this may happen and how is the organization going to handle it, and are they going to burn you at the stake if it does happen before you actually start implementing it.
Yeah, what's interesting is it's kind of the same vein that we talk about application security, right? Is doing those threat models and really expanding it out. And so the example I give in applications is, well, what if you early stages in development include a library that maybe is open source, right? And then as you go through the process, you get in more technical debt. If you're not taking a step back, looking at that library and seeing what risk it may pose, and if it does pose a risk, like if it's been abandoned and has vulnerabilities and there's no one around to fix it because it was open source, what's your plan, right? It's a similar thing to what you're talking about is, okay, if we develop this strategy, like what's our threat model for when automation breaks stuff, right? How do we quickly recover from that? And if you're not doing that level of threat analysis and threat modeling, you could be in a world of hurt in both cases.
Absolutely.
Well, on that uplifting note, I think that will conclude this edition of Enterprise Security Weekly. Happy Thanksgiving, everyone. Thank you for those in the U.S., I should say. And thank you for listening and watching. See you next time.